Hi, Ben here and welcome back. We are in the knife making workshop today and we've had a few people ask us how we go about putting our maker's mark on our blades. So I use a couple of different techniques depending on the style of knife or tool that we're making, but on the most part, especially on the polished blades, we use a technique which we call electrochemical etching. So I use an electrical etching machine that I bought from the States many years ago, and I use a combination of an electrolyte that helps pass that current through the steel, and you can create either what we call a deep etch, which actually erodes some of the metal away, leaving a very deep sort of logo, or you can use an oxide. So basically you flip the switch from AC to DC and you can create just black images, or you can use a combination of the two. So there's a few sort of niggles really when you come to using this process. So we thought, rather than just give you a sort of how you do it straight out the box, I'm going to show you the few things that I've modified and how I can get really crisp results every time. So let's look at some of the bits that we actually use for the etching process. So like I say, this machine provides the power, and this is quite a handy one because you've also got both the etch, which is the DC, and the mark, which leaves that black oxide mark, which is AC. So I can actually change AC and DC current, which is really good. And this has also got a little sort of volume control, and I sort of played around with different steels, different thicknesses, and I found that 4 seemed to be the absolute optimum. Now some machines won't give you this option, there'll be a fixed voltage, which is kind of a little bit of a disadvantage, but if you can get one that's got actual change, then that's really good. So normally what you get is you get these 2 leads. So you get obviously an earth, a ground, which you attach to your blade. I normally use this funny little wooden block just so that I can attach the ground without it sort of making the blade wobble. And then normally what you get is you get a carbon head. So this is the sort of the other sort of contact which you place onto the blade, and that will create the circuit. The head itself, you end up having to wrap a piece of felt around it, which you then saturate with your electrolyte. So the cable would go into there and you'd saturate it with the electrolyte. Now you use different electrolytes for different steels. So this is my sort of general purpose electrolyte, which I find works fantastic on carbon steels. And I also use another one which is specially designed for stainless steels. So this one I only use on my stainlesses, D2, things like that. And you'll see I normally write different recipes and numbers of timings and things like that on the bottle, so I know. What is important when you're using these electrolytes is that it's basically like a saline solution half the time. This is basically like a salty water. So make sure you give them a good shake if they've been sat on your bench for a while, to make sure that that electrolyte's going to work for you. Now obviously we're going to put a current through that electrolyte, and we need to create a resist. Now some people will use a sticker, some people will use even like a resist, like putting paint or wax and then scratching through that surface. But what I tend to use are these stencils. So I actually get these manufactured. These were made from a company in the UK called Ostling, and I send off my logo to them, and they create basically like almost like developing a photograph. They develop a plate and then they can produce these little stencils for me, and they last quite a while. You probably get maybe 200, 300 etches out of this. Normally what happens is they just start to break down just because you're moving them and bending them, and you'll get little cracks and marks in them. So I normally throw them away before they're sort of totally used up really. Now you can get different stencils for different people. So this is for a friend out in the States. He has this little mountain logo put on his blade, so I've got his logo, and I've also got different ones with different steel types. So I've got O1 steel there, and I've got one for my RWL34. So this has had a lot of use. You can see it started to discolour, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of masking tape on there just to make it easier to hold. Now like I say, I was getting iffy results with using this carbon head. Sometimes you'd get a really good crisp result, sometimes it'd be a bit patchy, and it's a real pain. But after you've spent, this is like the last process you do when you've made your blade, you've done all the heat treatment, you've almost got it to the surface finish you want. This is the last process I do before I put the handle scales on. And it's a real drag if you go through all that process and you get a bad etch, you've almost scrapped a blade. So what I found, and this was actually a bit of advice that I got given from a friend out in the States called Steve Long, he said, get rid of this carbon head. So I take that off, and I've just sourced some little stainless steel crocodile clips and put another crocodile clip on the end of my other cable. And what I use is just simple makeup removal pads, so cotton pads, and I'd normally get a small little ball and I attach that to my crocodile clip, and that basically makes that carbon head obsolete. So we can then use that in combination with one of our stencils, and then we'll soak this in the correct electrolyte, and then we can start to make the etch. So I'll get this saturated and we'll show you exactly how we go about doing it. So we've got a blade in there. Now this is a sort of scrap blade, and when you're learning about etching, I would say have a few scrap pieces of steel to test on. The one thing to be aware of, I found when I was trying to learn about etching, I was using a piece of annealed steel and you'd get totally different results to a piece of hardened steel. So this is a fully heat treated blade, the same as a finished knife would be. And okay, it's a bit scrap, it's got lots of different sort of sample etches on there and stuff. I normally make sure that it's taken to almost the finish, so this has got about a 320 grit finish on there. Then I'll do the etch and then we'll clean it up afterwards. So first thing to do is get our electrolyte. This is carbon steel, so I'm going to use the carbon steel electrolyte, and I normally just squirt a little bit into a plastic container, and then I'm going to totally saturate my cotton wool that's on the end of my one lead. Just squeeze a little bit of the excess off. Make sure that we've got the ground cable attached, and also make sure you've got it on a clean piece of steel. If it's got any kind of surface on there or paint or anything, it won't work. Then you get your stencil, and importantly, if it's got writing on it, make sure that it's the correct way round, so you actually want to be able to read it from this side. And then you pinch it onto your blade. If you wanted to, you could mark it if you wanted to get it in exactly the same place. I normally line it up so that it's almost in line with that plunge line. And then what we do is we turn on the machine and we make sure at this stage that we've got the rocker switch on etch, the DC. So this is going to do the deep etch into the surface of the steel. So a little bit of the electrolyte on there. I normally just pinch it in place with my finger, but you could use a piece of masking tape or sellotape if you wanted to. And then we're just going to dab onto the surface. Make sure that the cotton wool covers your logo itself. And you can almost see straight away it starts to go black, and you can see that it starts to buzz and fizz. So basically you can see that it's starting to remove steel. It's already changed the colour of my cotton wool. And I count. We want about 25 to 30 dabs. Because I'm talking, I've forgotten how many I've done. It's probably about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then roll it as well. So I swap it over. 13, 14, 15, 16, 18. That's about 25. So 25 to 30, that will give you a real deep etch. Now any time if that goes dry and it just starts to sort of buzz, just get it a bit more electrolyte on there. Now at that stage we have eaten into the surface of the steel, so that would just leave us a deep etch, but it would be silver. So to make a dark etch or an oxidization layer, we need to now flick it over to AC. Make sure the stencil doesn't move, and then we can use, you can put a little bit more electrolyte on there, but I normally just go again, and this time I only do about 12 dabs. So it's gone a bit dry now, so we'll put a little bit more on. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So counting's not my strong point at the best of times, especially when you're talking. So now, just as a double check, just before I sort of remove the stencil totally, is I normally lift it up just with my finger and I just check that I've got an etch there. And it's looking pretty ugly at the moment because we've got to do a bit of cleanup, but that looks like it's got black in the bottom and we should be good to go. So at that stage I normally take off the ground, I turn off my machine, and just because I've got a terrible memory, I always flick that back to etch first. You always want to do the etch, then the marking, otherwise you end up with totally the wrong way around. So we can remove that stencil, and you can actually probably see we've got sort of dirt and debris in that stencil, so it's important to clean that out as well, but we'll do that afterwards. So at that stage we've got our etch. We now want to neutralise the electrolyte. If you leave that electrolyte on there, you'll find that it will go rusty with time. And because we've done a deep etch, it's even more important that we really clean any of that electrolyte out the bottom of that etch. So what do you use as a neutralising agent? Well, if you're in the States, you can use Windex. I mean, Windex we use pretty much for everything, from neutralising ferric chloride to neutralising this. You can sometimes get it on Amazon in the UK, but you'll pay quite a lot of money for it. So I found that our alternative to Windex was Mr. Muscle. Unfortunately, they've stopped doing that now, so I've sort of stockpiled this. But now I've found that this is actually from Waitrose. This is Essential Window and Glass Cleaner. Basically, you're looking for something that's got ammonia in it. This seems to work pretty good, and compared to £7 for Windex on Amazon, this is 71p. So it's really good, and it also comes in a handy little squirter as well, so you can squirt a bit on. So I normally squirt a bit on there to neutralise the electrolyte, and then I use an old toothbrush and I give it a good old scrub. It's really important that we get right into the bottom of that deep etch and get any of that electrolyte out. You'll be really kicking yourself if you come back in a few hours time and you haven't done this, because you'll find that it'll have got like a little bloom around the logo. So I'll just get a little bit of tissue and we'll just dry that down. Now you'll see that we've got this sort of funny staining around the logo. That's why we don't do the total finish. So that this is like what I say, 320. I'll then put it on my surface plate, and I will actually just resand that, taking it back to about a 400 grit finish, and that will clean off this sort of oxidization that's around the outside. But that has given us a really nice deep etch that you can feel with your thumbnail. You can feel it clicking, and I know that that's going to last a long time. Some people that only use the AC mark, it'll give a very clear black logo, but with use or cleaning the blade, you'll find that it'll scratch off. So having the combination of the etch and then the mark, you'll get a real nice deep long lasting logo. So that's on my sort of scrap blade. These are some blades that we've already done, and we've already just gone over it with 400 grit sandpaper, and you can see we get this lovely surface finish and a really nice crisp logo. That's what you're aiming for, and there's nothing more satisfying when you finish cleaning up a blade after you've etched it and you see that it's worked properly. So hopefully that will give you a few top tips. Like I say, using that sort of cotton wool rather than that carbon head, you'll find that you'll get a much more consistent result, and you'll find that if you use a little bit of that same cleaner just to clean your stencils after use, you'll find that these will last a long time as well. So just making sure that you get all that crud out of the stencil, and keep them clean. I keep all my stencils in a little Tupperware containers to keep the dust and the dirt off them, and yeah, it works really good for me. So yeah, that's how I etch my blade. So that's how I go about putting my logo on with the electrochemical etch. I'll show you a few other methods in other videos of how we put the logos on when we've got our stonewash finish and things like that. But hopefully that's given you a few little top tips. I know that when I was learning how to do this process, it was very frustrating. Some people would say you've got to do it like this, and other people would tell you totally contradicting it. But yeah, with this simple little setup, I seem to get crisp results every time, and the stencils last a lot longer as well. So a few simple little additions like the Windex and things like that, or the Mr. Muscle, will give you that nice neutralised finish as well. So hopefully that will help all the knife makers out there, or if you're another tool maker that's putting some kind of logo on your tools, hopefully that helps. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments below. And if you're not already subscribing to our channel, please subscribe to the channel for more knife making related videos. We've also got lots on sharpening and green woodworking. So yeah, we'd like to see you subscribe to the channel, and yeah, really enjoy showing you these little techniques that I've picked up over the years. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.